welcome all of you, Moderna team and our Bruins, to the Future of Work Conference, Navigating Disruption. This is our Career HotSpot Industry Series. We are featuring Moderna because of their phenomenal work in pivoting, adjusting, and navigating disruption for the past, well, their time, I believe it's almost 10 years or over 10 years, and the past year and a half, of course. They really exemplify what the Career HotSpot is meant to present. That is a company that is quick to change, upskilling, a company that is really managing disruption in such a way that propels them forward, meets the demands of the day, and really stands out as a leader in the global economy. So today's title is The Moderna World is Expanding, and that's exactly what you think it means. Their recruiting is expanding, and it's an exciting opportunity for all of us. I wanted to show you our special guests. Today we have Kerrie, Amy, and Brian. We will have Phillip joining us soon. He's going to drop in. We wanted him listed there because he's a Bruin, and we've got to show a love for our blue and gold. Amy, Brian, and Kerrie, I'm going to ask that you introduce yourselves more officially and then begin your program. I'm so excited. Bruins, thank you so much. And Moderna, thank you for being here. Take it away.
Great.
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. I'll just jump in first. I'm Kerrie Patten. I work in talent acquisition as a program specialist. I met David recently to set this off and get our positions and a great match with the students that are looking, but also just to share some great general information about Moderna. Pass it on to Amy. Thank you.
Sure, thanks, Kerrie, and thanks, David. Hi, everyone. My name is Amy Rabideau. I'm an associate director here at Moderna. I lead the early phase mRNA process development team. So that means that we're responsible for defining and designing the process that we use to make our mRNA molecules when they are first nominated as drug candidates. Brian?
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Doyle. I'm a director in the mRNA process development group. So I'm Amy's counterpart on the late phase side of process development. So my team and I are responsible for making sure that our mRNA manufacturing processes can be scaled up to meet the demands of the world, and that we manufacture product that is robustly high quality and meets the expectations not only of our patients but also of global health authorities. All right, Amy, do you want to bring up our slides?
Yeah. Yeah,
Great.
so we have a couple of slides to give you guys an overview of what Moderna is, what mRNA is, and just some fun facts about, what we are. And then we'll give kind of a little bit of an overview, Brian and I, of how we got to Moderna. And then we'll open it up for Q&A. Our section shouldn't take too long. We're really here to answer any questions that you might have as it relates to Moderna as they come up. So I will share my screen right now. All right, perfect. Okay, so I like the title of this. I don't know who came up with it, but I think it's appropriate. The Moderna world is expanding, and David mentioned this in the beginning, that Moderna is only 10 years old. I actually think our 10-year anniversary is in like July or something. Yeah, so we have been doing a lot. We've been increasing our pipeline, but we've also been advancing molecules through the clinic and now into commercial. And we're also growing as a company. So you'll see that highlighted as we go through these couple of slides here. So I wanted to start with what our mission is. And this is something that is plastered on the walls throughout the company. Actually, both Brian and I are in our Norwood site in Massachusetts right now. We have, whiteboard walls everywhere to help encourage innovative thought and stuff like that. But anyway, what boils it down is this mission right here: to deliver on the promise of mRNA science to create a new generation of transformative medicines for patients. And every word of that has, meetings here to Moderna employees, but at the heart of it is really making good medicine for people in need. And so for us, that includes vaccines, but also therapeutics for rare disease, oncology, and a number of different areas. And what I'll first describe is why mRNA. We get this question a lot, and I think there's more and more information out there in the world on why mRNA makes sense as a drug. But to answer this question, it really kind of boils down to the central dogma of molecular biology, which hopefully many of you are familiar with. And so that basically breaks down that DNA is made into mRNA, which is made into protein. And so we're really honing in on that second step because we think that it's the software of life. mRNA is the instructions that the body uses to make these proteins. So we think of DNA as the hard drive or the mechanics behind what that information actually should be. It's that genetic storage of information that is then transcribed into messenger RNA. And this is a more adaptable molecule. It's short-lived. And the body translates that mRNA message into protein. And those proteins are really what serve most of the function within cells. And so we're really asking that question, can mRNA be a drug? And we think that if mRNA is a drug, it could be a platform. So mRNA has a couple of interesting features, but the one feature that I'm going to focus on right now is this blue bar in the middle of the box in the middle. I don't know if you guys can see my mouse, but anyway, it's called the coding region. And the thought is that if we can deliver this nucleic acid polymer, more or less, into the cell, this coding region could encode for any protein that we can think of. And then we can utilize the body's machinery or the cell's machinery to translate this mRNA into a protein. So for the ribosome to sit on and to make a protein. So if we can encode for a spike protein or an enzyme that is mutated in a diseased cell or something like that, then perhaps you can make a response, an appropriate response that could be therapeutic in some way. And so what's highlighted here in this blue box is that if mRNA works once, it should work over and over again for different coding regions that are then coding for different proteins. So there are lots of different options for what this could be. And the logic is that we would like the development of mRNA drugs to be fast. And I think we've seen that over the last year and a half, or really a little over a year, in the development of our COVID vaccine to support the pandemic that's ongoing right now. So just a couple more things. So mRNA can't, well, in some cases can, but majority speaking, can't be delivered into a cell by itself. It needs to be packaged somehow or protected. And so this is where our formulation comes into play. That's what's on the left of the screen. So we use what's called a lipid nanoparticle to package our mRNA. It not only protects the mRNA from external factors that might degrade it, but it also gets it into the place or the location within the cell that we want it to be expressed. I think that's it. I think I'm going to pass the baton over to Brian, and he'll go through some of the things more about our company.
Sure. Thanks, Amy. So this slide has a lot of information on it, so I'm only going to speak to a few of the things. Otherwise, we could spend the whole rest of the hour explaining through everything. So I think what's really exciting and sets Moderna apart from our peers in the industry, and I think peers that Amy and I have experienced in our past careers, as well as just the breadth and the depth of the pipeline. So for a company this long to already have one program that's in a commercial phase, which is our COVID-19 vaccine, is a huge accomplishment. And we're not stopping there. We have other programs right behind it in phase 3 preparation. So that's the final stage of clinical trials prior to seeking commercialization. So we have a CMV vaccine. That's a vaccine for cytomegalovirus, which is one of the leading causes of infectious disease-related birth defects in children. So it's a current, very large actual unmet medical need that we are rapidly advancing as well. And then digging further deeper into the pipeline, 3 programs in phase 2 and already 13 positive readouts out of phase 1 programs too. So these are programs that are in initial safety consideration, where we already have metrics that suggest, like Amy said, if the platform works once, which we've demonstrated for our commercial COVID-19 vaccine, it's going to continue working for all of these other programs that we're making proteins for using mRNA. And the data is there to support that. Where we stand as a company, as of March 31st, we have over 1,500 employees. I've been at Moderna for just over 2 years, and I think we were under 700 then. So, this is a company that is growing really fast, and really, big kudos to the recruiting team and everyone here that does outreach into our educational network to find great employees to come work here and have a lot of fun every day. Moderna isn't just, new as a great employer, though. This is our 6th year as a top employer in Science Magazine. So the company culture is one that's been established throughout Moderna's history. And, now we have the added excitement of the commercial product and the growth that's been associated with that in the past year to go on top of what was already a great company to begin with. I think the next number is hard to almost look at and fathom what that means. In 2021, we're talking about up to 1 billion doses of our COVID-19 vaccine being made. Even when you think of that as being divided up into 10-dose vials, we're still talking about 100 million vials. That's a huge number. The more and more you break that out, that's still a very large number of boxes of vials, of pallets of boxes of vials. It's amazing to think about what that means just from a physical perspective, but then of course what it means for the world as well. And as everyone, continues to get vaccinated, and we start to really see the impact that vaccination is happening. I think the other points on this slide are a little bit more in the details that aren't super interesting to have talked about, so about money and commercial sites. But of course, Moderna is in a very stable growth position right now as it comes, in the years ahead. There's nothing but exciting opportunities in the pipeline and exciting opportunities for the continued growth of the company in so many different ways. All right, Amy, should we move to the next slide? Okay, so I think something that everyone always wants to know about is where exactly do we work? So we are in it says Manufacturing Technology Center here. I thought it was Moderna Technology Center, but either way, it's MTC. It's a growing campus in Norwood, Massachusetts. So we're roughly 15 miles outside of Boston. We have 3 buildings now on our campus. So there's the MTC South building. This was the first building which houses our main clinical and now commercial manufacturing facility. MTC North was built out last year, right at the beginning of the pandemic. A lot of our last minute preparations for the move happened in that March to April timeline, right when things were as confusing as possible. And we didn't know when things were going to change and when people were going to be able to go back to work. Lab moves are already difficult enough, especially when you're moving between sites, let alone when you're trying to minimize your contact with people, and we were really still figuring things out. So we landed here in the MTC North building, our entire technical development operation in May of last year. So we just celebrated our 1-year anniversary here. And just to speak to the continued growth of Moderna, we occupied maybe 1/3 of the building when we first moved in. We've already expanded part of the downstairs at the beginning of this year. We expanded in office space upstairs last year, and we're actually completing the build out of the remainder of the building this year. So, just within our organization, which is process development, really focused on the science and technology, the growth is just enormous. I mean, our floor space alone, I think, is quadrupling, which is great. We need the space to spread out a bit, and for all of our exciting new equipment as well. And we recently just announced this MTC East building will be joining us as well. So again, we need the space to meet the capabilities that we're working to build, and also to deliver the products that we have in our pipeline. And so this is a company that's invested in making the investments that need to happen in order to make our pipeline a reality. Great. And I think this is a really important piece to close our presentation on. So what are some things that differentiate Moderna from other companies out there in the industry? So one really important piece is our commitment to belonging, inclusion, and diversity. And this is not just something that we say. We take action to make sure that we make the steps, not only in our hiring, not only in the way that we interact when we're recruiting and in employment practices, but I think this third bullet point is one thing that is extremely important. I've been really happy to see not only Moderna, but actually the industry as a whole focus more on committing to diversity in clinical trials. So Moderna made the active choice last year during the recruitment for our phase 3 trial to actually slow the recruitment down to ensure that we were getting as representative of a volunteer population in that trial as possible. So, when so many pressures around, when you're the pandemic, the financial prospects of where we could go, to actually say, no, we're actually going to slow down this development to make sure we're doing this right, and we're doing this in a way that's reflective and inclusive, is really game changing actually for this industry. So it's great to see Moderna take the lead on that. Of course, commitment to the environment could not be underspoken as well. We are taking steps as well to look into ways to reduce emissions, also be more renewable in our resources. It was actually a question that I asked to our chief technical officer on our first day here. On my first day here was, what are we doing to make our processes better for the environment? And again, it's another space where we take that actually to heart, and it's more than just a commitment. We're actually taking action on it. And then lastly, of course, in community outreach, Moderna strives to be a member of our local community, as well as an advocate in many of the disease areas that we have products under development. So we're working to be a partner in CMV, for example. So the picture we see here is a picture that was taken in the lab for CMV Day. So Moderna is, not only are we trying to find ways to treat these different diseases and treat these infectious and prevent infectious disease as well through our vaccines, we're actually working within the broader space that these outreach organizations, advocacy groups, et cetera, to really actually have a broader impact as well. All right, so I think now we'll move on to the question about how did we each get to Moderna. And what's nice is that Amy and I actually have slightly different career stories and backgrounds as well. So hopefully it'll be good for you to see two different perspectives that both brought us here in the end. So maybe, Amy, should we start with you?
Sure, that's fine with me.
Okay.
Yeah, so I started at Moderna actually a little over 5.5 years ago. So I am considered a dinosaur here, actually, because I started when we were around 200 people and not in the clinic yet. So we had a couple of molecules that we were preparing to go into the clinic, and I've just seen an explosion of activities, of hiring, of changes over the years. But I'll give you a little bit perspective of who I am and how I got here, just to help set the context for now what I do here. I went to Syracuse University in New York, and I studied chemistry and biology as a double major. And knew I loved research, did research throughout all of my undergrad, mostly in chemistry, at the lab bench, and really enjoyed it. And, you know, thought I wanted to go into medicine, thought I wanted to go to medical school, but really found my interests were piqued in the lab. And so ultimately decided to go to graduate school directly after graduating from undergrad. And so that's what I did. I applied to a number of different programs focusing on biochemistry or really translational research. So, you know, something giving my research some applicability to the medical field was really what I was looking for from my research. Ultimately, I decided to go to MIT here in Cambridge, Massachusetts, for my PhD, specializing in biological chemistry. I spent 5 years at MIT. Every single year was extremely difficult for various reasons. But ultimately, I would never change that experience for anything. I think I learned so much about how to ask a really good scientific question, how to include the right controls in an experiment, how to communicate my findings and communicate also things that weren't working out, how to be an independent thinker, and, you know, to know that actually I'm the only person in the world who can probably answer this question. And so I just have to figure it out, and things like that. And so there were a lot of challenges and learnings that I gained along the way that I really appreciated. If you're interested, my research focused on the delivery of peptides and proteins into cells using a novel delivery strategy, which is actually a bacterial toxin called anthrax toxin. So it took me through a pretty wide space of subjects. So I did peptide chemistry, I did protein purification, chromatography, analytics, I did my own cell assays and stuff like that. And so it really kind of prepared me for a cross-functional type role, or a role that focused on, you know, more than one thing. And so when it came to wrapping up, I found myself at recruiting events, at career fairs, really anywhere that I could look for a job. I knew I didn't want to go into academia. I knew I did not want to be a professor. I knew I wanted to go into industry and to help, you know, through my research. And so I ended up, you know, sending out my resume wherever I could. And, you know, this was kind of a right place, right time kind of situation where I ended up getting a phone call for a position at this new company, Moderna, and ended up doing a couple of interviews. And so long story short, I got a job for something that I never applied for. But it ended up working out. I literally had no idea what I was going to be doing. I'd heard of mRNA before, but never worked with it. But used a lot of those skills that I learned along the way through undergrad, through grad school, and that, you know, push to be an independent thinker, to ask, you know, critical questions and to think through hard challenges. And so that's what led me here. So again, I started here a little over 5.5 years ago as a scientist at the bench, doing lab work most of my time, and trying to figure out, you know, how we could make mRNA better. You know, what was inhibiting our productivity? What was in our final product as process or product-related impurities? How could we characterize those? And ultimately, how could we make mRNA better so that we could do more and more with respect to our pipeline in the future? So now I'm kind of flash forward a few years. I'm now leading this mRNA early phase development team, which is a ton of fun. And what it means is that we're working at finding new ways to make mRNA. We're looking at ways to characterize our mRNA. but really collaborate with our fellow colleagues in analytical and formulations and all of these different teams to make sure we understand our process and our product as fully as we can. And ultimately, we're seeing a lot of new molecules come our way because we are the first people to experience drug candidates as they get nominated. So that's really exciting for us to consider the different quality attributes, the different features our mRNA needs to have in order for it to be as efficacious as possible. And as I mentioned, we have a number of different therapeutic areas that we're developing molecules for. And so that's been, really, really exciting and challenging all at the same time for us to define a process that works platform-wide, but is therapeutic area specific. So maybe with that, I'll hand it over to Brian to tell his story, and then we can open it up for Q&A.
Sure. So my story of how I got to Moderna. So I was born and raised in California. I don't know if I necessarily thought I would end up on the East Coast, but here I am. So I was always really excited about making things and always really excited about what cells could do. So I knew when I went to college, I wanted to do something that involved making things, cells, and if possible too, that it was something that helped the world or saved the world. So that's kind of the vision I had in mind. I was lucky enough to go to MIT for my undergrad, and like same thing. I showed up there and I wasn't sure what I wanted to major in. Saying I just knew I wanted to do making things and cells, and it was actually introductory class in chemical engineering that had Danny Wong, who recently passed away, but was one of the sort of fathers of biotechnology, give a lecture. And I thought, okay, if this is chemical engineering, this is exactly what I want to do. And so that was what pushed me in that direction. And of course, any of you that are in chemical engineering, there's a lot more to chemical engineering than just cells. So there were things that I enjoyed more and things that I enjoyed less about learning in chemical engineering. But what really sold me on industry as being the direction I wanted to take were actually the industrial experiences that I got in my summers away from MIT. So I was lucky enough to spend the summer after my junior year working in an industrial enzyme manufacturing company. So, the enzymes that make alcohol or sugar-free beer sugar-free, the enzymes that make bleach-free detergents bleach-free, it's all enzymes, and those all have to get manufactured somewhere. And I just remember being so amazed seeing the facility. We were talking about, developing a process that starts as a vial, and you can research at a lab bench, but then you ultimately scale up to hundreds of thousands of liters. So the reactors that those enzymes are being made in are 3 stories tall, housed inside of essentially a grain silo. So I was remember being just so amazed, just seeing the equipment. It was just so massive, and thinking, just everything that was going on there, and it really lined up with those passions that I had. Maybe enzymes aren't necessarily always saving the world, but now they kind of are. It was making products, using cells to do so, and I thought, oh, okay, this clicks. And I remember just being very excited being in that space. So when I graduated from MIT, I made the choice to go directly into industry. I was undecided if I wanted to pursue a master's degree or PhD at the time, and I got the opportunity to work at Merck in vaccine process development, and I said, this hits all of the boxes. Exactly what I want to be doing. It's the exact process elements that I loved from that internship and that I loved learning about in school, while at the same time making vaccines that could potentially save people's lives. While I was there, it was a really great place to get started. I worked on a lot of different projects. I spent 3 years there, and I probably worked on 6 or 7 very, very different projects along the way, completely different processes, different organisms being used to make the product, very, very different requirements for each one. Some were at the earliest phases of process development, so trying to figure out if the molecule could be made in that particular expression host, and if so, what that looked like, up to supporting programs that were already actually commercial and on the market. After my 3 years there, I decided I wanted to move into the world of monoclonal antibodies. Anyone that's involved in the biotechnology space, that's sort of the heart of the biotechnology industry for many years now. Maybe mRNA is going to take its place, but for a very long time, that was sort of the standard, the gold standard of bioprocessing and careers in bioprocessing. So I decided I needed to get my hands on that. And I actually spent 7 years doing cell culture process development for manufacturing monoclonal antibodies. I had heard about Moderna for quite a few years before coming here. I remember hearing about it back when it first came out of being sort of the stealth company that it was, and thinking that they had some really slick videos about the high level of automation and the high level of digital infrastructure that they had, and being like, wow, that's really different than the extremely hands-on day-to-day that I have right now. And then, I just sort of let it sit in the back of my mind that this company existed, and it was just one that I was going to keep tabs on along the way. In 2018, I felt like I was ready for a change. I wanted a new technical challenge. I wanted to explore what I could do in a new therapeutic area or a new molecule type or a new role. And so I started looking, and I came across a position at Moderna that fit very well with the experience that I had been having at Gilead, which was my previous employer. There I had spent years of working on a single project, which is pretty unusual, and had spent all that time sort of shepherding it through the late phases of process development. So figuring out how we scale it up, where we're going to manufacture it, what we need to do to the process in order to make it work at very different manufacturing facilities, and then actually understanding how the process works at a very deep level. This was a process that did not behave well. It had a lot of things that at first just looked like random occurrences, and our role as a late phase process development organization was to figure out why those things happen, solve them, and control them and prevent them from happening again. So I came to this position at Moderna with that sort of background and mindset of being most well-versed in that late phase process development, and that's actually where the role has, both by chance and design, evolved. I started here at Moderna looking at what at the time was our most advanced program, which was the CMV program, and thinking about, okay, how are we going to develop a late phase process? How are we going to scale up, scale out a process for our first late phase program? And everything was going along with that. It already felt like we were moving really fast compared to other places that I worked. And then here comes 2020. And our COVID vaccine comes along. I think what's been the most surprising part about it all is literally thinking about how we're taking something that takes that lab scale, those years of hard work that Amy talked about, and then putting it on this rocket to being a product within less than 1 year in the end. When we talked to our suppliers, and they were asking about what sort of scales we need for materials, they would tell us what they thought we would need, and we'd say, no, multiply that by 1,000. That's what we're talking about here. We're talking about an entire supply chain that was really oriented towards an academic and research space that needed to be converted over to a commercial level, both in terms of size and quality, very, very quickly. I can't say enough about how exciting of an opportunity it's been to be able to play a role in working on this vaccine and working on the rest of the products in our late phase pipeline. It really just came down to luck and chance a lot of the ways throughout my career. The right thing came up at the right time that pushed me in the right direction that opened a new door, that you know, brought me to the right place. You know, I don't think there's anything particularly special about my background or my you know, my career that said that I was the right person to do this for Moderna. It's just about, it just ended up being, you know, being in the right place at the right time. And that was, you know, just extremely fortunate and exciting to have been part of that.
All right. So that's what we have to share. And we can now open it up to Q&A. I will stop sharing now. Let's see. There we go. Sorry, we use WebEx here at Moderna.
Yeah, Amy and I were commenting that neither of us are Zoom experts.
We use Zoom for 1.5 years, and we are not Zoom experts. So no apologies needed. Amy, are you able to see the question in the Q&A box? I'll read it out to you. It says, question for Amy. How long did it take you to be promoted to group leader position? And can you tell us a bit more about how Moderna supports employees' growth?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Thanks for that. Yeah, so I've been promoted twice here at Moderna so far. And I would say I've taken a pretty typical path on the promotion train here. So as I mentioned, I started off as a scientist, and that's the level, at least at Moderna, that most new PhDs come in at. If you're a student or a new graduate that has a bachelor's degree, usually that's the research associate or engineer 1 level, just for you know, setting expectations. But yeah, so I started as the scientist level. I had no direct reports. I was an independent contributor, as they like to call it. I was controlling all of my own experiments, reporting out all my data, and you know, working more cross-functionally than, you know, managing down. After about 2.5 years, I was promoted to senior scientist, and it was at that point that I got my first direct report. And I would say that I was, you know, just given a direct report, and, you know, I was asked to foster that individual, and, you know, was responsible for her success. And so that was a huge responsibility. I probably could have used more managerial training, but the training wheels were taken off very quickly. And I would say that was a huge learning moment and professional development opportunity for myself. So since then, so 2 years after I was promoted from senior scientist, I was promoted to principal scientist, and then ultimately converted to associate director on the managerial track. And at its largest, my team has been 12 direct reports, so that is a lot of people. But was you know, has been a really interesting experience to be responsible for the research and the readouts and all of the day-to-day activities for those individuals. In terms of Moderna supporting that managerial track or that trajectory, they've been wholly supportive along the way. I think there are things that we still need to learn and develop as we grow as a company. Remember, we're still fairly small and new. I like to think that we're in our teenage years, not startup, not baby. We're learning, but we haven't learned it all yet. We're not an adult. So I think there's still some tools and techniques that Moderna can do to support young managers. But no, I think we have fantastic mentors here, and not assigned, you know, kind of self-found, but people who can be role models, who can really kind of show like how to manage hard situations, how to tackle hard challenges that aren't your own, and stuff like that. So yeah, it's been a really interesting experience. Thanks for the question.
Great. We have another question here, very technical one. Are job opportunities available for international postdocs or do you need a green card or to be a US citizen to apply?
Kerrie, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I can jump in here. I think it's a case-by-case basis depending on the need of the position. So I know it's not really an answer that you probably were looking for. You can feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'd be happy to look into a specific role if you had an interest in a specific role. So again, Kerrie, Patten, happy to take it on with you. But have we sponsored people in the past? Absolutely. So I know that's a better answer to your question, but happy to take it offline and talk to you one-on-one. And then also put you in contact with the recruiter if you're interested. Thank you.
Thank you, Kerrie. Next question from an anonymous attendee. What would you say Moderna is looking for in terms of new hires? Of course, that's position specific, but maybe referencing the jobs that you're looking to fill now.
Sure, I can speak to that a little bit. The advice I'll give is really independent of level. So in my team right now, I'm hiring positions that are both entry level, bachelor's or master's. So like Amy mentioned, the research associate engineer level, as well as more senior at the senior engineer or scientist level. And really what I'm looking for are people that are passionate, for one. You need to be excited about this work. You need to be excited about the potential of mRNA to improve global human health, to really want to do what it takes to make that happen. I'd say the passion here is a level above anywhere else I've ever worked. That this isn't just a place people are coming for a paycheck or just coming to to have a job. This is a place that people are coming because they do want to have that impact. So the better you can share that information through the ways that we initially interact with you, which is just your resume. So however you can make that passion and that shine in your resume, and then also in an interview, tell me not just what you did, but why and why that mattered. That catches my attention. And then I think at any level, no matter what your background or experience is, if you have a PhD or not, you have examples of challenges that you've solved, problems that you faced, and innovation and research that you've done. So when I'm looking at resumes, those are the two main things I'm looking for: is that evidence of passion and that evidence of the ability to solve problems. Solving problems is a day-to-day and sometimes an hour-to-hour situation. So I'm looking for people that can see a problem, think of a solution, think of how to get there, and do it.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, so I added the link to our Moderna Careers website in the chat, so feel free to click it. The last time I looked, there were over 400 job openings, which is, blows my mind right now. Oh, it's higher than that. Anyway, there's a lot of job openings. Please, feel free to take a look. Moderna is hiring in every, space and group. So feel free to take a look. There's a lot of interesting stuff out there. I guess the one thing I'll add to what Brian was saying is that we have 4 core values here at Moderna. And I think that they shine through in every single successful Moderna employee that you see. It's collaborative, bold, curious, and relentless. And you'll see them exemplified in many situations. And I would say that the development of our COVID vaccine was a place where we saw unprecedented displays of the Moderna core values, in every place, every sector, development, clinical development, analytic, like everywhere. And so we're very proud of it.
That's amazing. Actually, I want to allow Paula Souza Camara to ask her question out loud. Paula, do you mind asking your great question out loud?
No, I don't mind at all. So actually, I was just asking what the responsibilities and the day-to-day just role of someone coming in as a research associate with a Bachelor of Science would be like.
Sure, I can maybe start. Thanks for your question, Paula. I really appreciate it. Thanks for asking it. Yeah, so we have a lot of different places that research associates will enter at, and I think it really depends on the discipline that you will be starting out at Moderna. So there's biologists, there's chemical engineers, there's biological engineers, there's, analysts, there's a whole lot of people here. But I would say for, say, a research associate starting in my team or perhaps Brian's team, many of their day-to-day activities are experiments in the lab. So most of the time that a typical research associate will be at Moderna will be at the lab bench, working on a DOE, a design of experiment strategy, or, working on an experiment, looking at, how a variable is impacting a reaction, or how to purify an RNA, or, what impurity is this? So there's a lot of different things that any research associate could be involved with. We also do a lot of manufacturing support, or in fact, a research associate could be a manufacturing associate, someone who's actually on the manufacturing floor making coronavirus vaccine or COVID vaccine, for example. So there's a lot of different types of roles, and that'll really depend on, what you want to do, and what the job description fills your or suits your skills.
That's great. And I think I'll just pivot. I see one more question that's kind of related on this point too, about opportunities for those with non-technical or non-STEM backgrounds. And I do want to highlight too, yeah, Amy and I both, we work together in the same group, so our perspective is one that's very technical and STEM, but Moderna is a complete pharmaceutical company. So, if this is an industry that you're interested in, you don't necessarily have to be a scientist working in the lab or an engineer working in a manufacturing facility to have a role here. And we have really exciting opportunities in things like medical affairs, so, dealing directly with buyers, for example, and dealing with global health networks, health authorities for figuring out how products make it out into the world. Same thing on the clinical side, clinical planning, legal, commercial, sales, communications, finance, outsourcing, project management. These are all sorts of things that you don't necessarily need to have a background and necessarily need to understand 100% of the nuances of making an mRNA vaccine or therapeutic. You do have to be passionate about it, of course, to come in this environment and help deliver it. But the company is more than just us as scientists and engineers. It's everybody that comes together to make the products and make the organization work.
I always want to make a plug for our students and their talent and ask, what do you foresee as opportunities in the internship arena prior to graduating? Have you seen any development there? What can students expect?
I can take that one. Hi. Thanks so much for your question. Yeah, so I manage the interns and the co-ops. We started with the co-op program probably about 6-7 years ago, well before I was here. I've been here 3.5 years. And the co-op program is now a really healthy program. And we actually mirrored the Northeastern program, 7-8 years ago. And we kind of have kept to that. So we have like a January through June session, and then we have a July through December session. And so right now we're finishing up hiring for the July through December session. And then in August, we will post for the positions for the January through June session. Internships, on the other hand, Last summer, for obvious reasons, we canceled a lot. This summer, those all have been filled, and I think we're expecting 30 or more this summer. So it's been a huge increase from the previous summer in 2019. There was probably about 10 to 12 maybe that summer. So we're definitely seeing an increase as we grow. The program is growing tremendously. So if you're interested to keep an eye out, probably in that September timeframe for the January through June co-ops. We actually have a student here from UCLA. I think we're also recruiting, we have one coming this July, which is really exciting, and Cal Berkeley as well. So definitely we're touching upon universities and colleges on the West Coast, all over the United States. So it's very, very exciting. And please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn for future positions too.
Thank you all. We have a question about work-life balance. How do you achieve that given the rapid growth, especially trying to put out the vaccine?
Good question.
I'll add to that.
Yeah,
Moderna has been amazing. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Amy.
Oh, go ahead, Kerrie. Please, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say the one thing, I think it was last Thanksgiving around November, just one thing comes to mind, that we all got surprise boxes of soup and cookies and rolls in the mail. And I'm in talent acquisition, very close to human resources. And I typically I hear about these fun things we're doing to support our employees. And my husband got the door and he's like, there's this huge package for you and it's really heavy. And it says careful, caution. I'm like, okay, I have no idea what it is. It was just a huge jug of soup. And that's just one of the many things that Moderna has done to try to just help its employees during a very difficult and stressful time for many reasons and obvious reasons. But we also have offered workout sessions. We actually have an on-site gym that we encouraged people to use during COVID. Probably there were some restrictions, but the workout sessions, we had online workout sessions for the whole company to try. Our benefits offer some great benefits to keep, your mind healthy during all this as well, not just physical health. So those are like top three that come to mind. But Amy and Brian, feel free to jump in if there was anything that you utilized.
Yeah, I would say it was really challenging. I think, it's one thing to go through a pandemic, but it's another thing to develop a vaccine during a pandemic that's also affecting you and your loved ones and your family. But I think that was really motivating for a lot of us. And we kind of had to use that as fuel to just keep going. So I would say last year probably saw a lot more hours of work than were normal from a typical Moderna employee. But I think for myself, it's been drawing a line, and I have to draw that line. Moderna will happily take every hour you want to give it of your time. But finding that place, and I think this applies everywhere, if you're in school, if you're, at a job somewhere else, it's finding that balance between, I will do this now, and then I will do, something else for me so that I can either relax or, come up with a new idea by not thinking about this thing anymore. But yeah, for me, it's been drawing that line. The encouragement that the leadership throughout the organization has given us along the way, and reminding us of all of these, pieces of information of 1 billion doses, and how many that have actually been received into arms and stuff like that. Like, that's super encouraging, and really appreciate it that they, are able to trickle down that information to us. And it's not just during COVID time. It's during normal times as well, where, leadership is always really excited to give us information on how trials are going, and what's happening with those molecules that we're making. So.
Yeah, I think one additional piece of advice, that's something I wish I had thought about earlier in my career too, in terms of setting good work-life balance, is learning when to say no. And like Amy said, really setting your own lines. You know, the science doesn't stop because you need to sleep sometimes, and it will gladly take over. You know, just because you can always keep going, you can keep researching more, you can keep studying more. And it does become very important to think about, how do you organize your life to make sure that you are still doing the things that you're passionate about? So yeah, I mean, I think it's important to understand when you should say no, and also understand too that you don't always have to be perfect. I think those are the two things that really caused me a lot of stress getting started in the industry, was thinking that I had to deliver 100% of things perfectly and always on time. You know, as I've gotten older and more mature, it's often a negotiation. You know, these are the things that I can do within the constraints and the limits that I have. And I think the earlier that you feel comfortable, you know, having that sort of conversation with your manager, I'm sure it's a conversation that your manager has had with their manager at some point too. So, you know, you know, I remember having very, very stressful times in my first year, especially getting started in industry, and now thinking back about how much more I'm doing now, you know, and yet at the same time, I feel like I'm doing, you know, I used to pull a lot of all-nighters just because that was the way that the project went. You know, I think I probably could have said something and had a much less stressful start. So, you know, trust your gut and don't be afraid to speak up when, you know, when you need time for yourself.
Thank you all. We've got a few more minutes, just very few minutes. I want to ask you all to please, in the spirit of preparation for tomorrow's career fair, a bunch of these students are going to be signing up for the one-on-ones with you. Any advice you can share with our Bruins before we go today about what they can do to prepare? When you meet with a student at a career fair, face-to-face, or in this case, virtually, what do you hope they have brought with them? What kind of preparation? What are the do's and don'ts, if you wouldn't mind giving your advice?
Yeah, I guess I would recommend that the student look at the careers website that I shared earlier. Having something to concretely talk about with the recruiter or the individual who's doing this one-on-one session goes miles, because now that individual, whoever is the Moderna representative, can look up specifically in our system who is the hiring manager and or who is the lead recruiter for that position, and make a connection. If it's very, you know, I'm looking for these kinds of roles, you know, that is a starting point for the conversation, knowing what you enjoy, but definitely having done your homework ahead of time will help facilitate that conversation and let you get further in the conversation with the recruiter. I don't know, Kerrie or Brian, if you have anything else.
So as a just maybe, I assume many companies do this. So we give you actually a lot of information to read through before the interview. So you should, in addition, do your own research on our website, but we're actually giving you additional information. It's probably about 10 pages long. It's a Moderna overview that is created quarterly. So we expect and that you actually also write down some questions of your own about this literature, because it shows us, whether it's the recruiter or the hiring manager, that you've done some research and that you've spent time reading more about a potential company that you could potentially get an offer from. I can't tell you how many times students, even just for co-ops and internships, I can't see their passion, like Brian said. Like, there are plenty of students though that do their research and totally impress me because they've done their research, because they've had questions already written out on the pad of paper. You know, look engaged. I know WebEx is not always, and Zoom is not always the best, but I can see if someone has notes written down. I can see if they're taking notes while they're talking to me. So I can't emphasize as enough to just do your homework ahead of time, and look people up on LinkedIn, look at their backgrounds, you know, and be inquisitive of people's backgrounds. And people sometimes, not always, but for the most part, people like to talk about themselves and their career path. So I think it's actually cool when someone say, well, Kerrie, I noticed that you were in the travel industry. How did you get from the travel industry to Moderna? You know, I know this, you were Genzyme years ago, but how did your career path? Because at the end of the conversation, do you have any other questions? The worst for a recruiter or somebody in HR is to hear, no, I think I'm all set. Like, we're like, oh, no. So really just put a little bit more time and effort into that. And I think it'll go a long way.
Yeah, totally agree. I think if you can demonstrate to me that you understand just even anything about what Moderna is and what we do, you're already off on a good start. And then the other advice I would give is, don't let it become a one-way conversation. It needs to be a two-way conversation. So you're asking me questions, I'm asking you questions, and make sure in your responses to questions you give enough detail that keeps that conversation going. It can't just be a yes/no answer. I'm looking for something that I can sort of latch onto to keep the conversation going with follow-up questions. So finding that right balance between just giving a lecture for the entire interview, but also then on the opposite side, not giving enough information is really key. So think about how to tell an interesting story concisely in a way that makes me want to ask a follow-up question.
You all are incredible. I'm going to share my screen and do my very best to thank you in a way that's appropriate, given the wisdom and experience that you shared with us. You guys are incredible. We are so thrilled to have you. Here are our special guests. Again, Phillip was trying to jump in, our fellow Bruin. He was not able to participate. But again, I want to say thank you to you all, and I want to share with you tomorrow's schedule for the Future of Work Conference. Again, the Higher UCLA Job and Internship Fair, Moderna is signed up and has one-on-one sessions available. So you want to jump on there now to register, find the information on Handshake. Thank you for making our Career Hotspot such a great event, and we look forward to working with you and recruiting with you in the future. Bruins, you are awesome. Moderna, you rock. Thank you so much. Everyone have a great evening.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.